Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Kevin Carr, author of Functional Training Anatomy for the Video People. I'm holding up my copy of that book right here. Also the owner, you own a lot of stuff. Some of the highlights include you're part of the ownership group now of Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning, MBSC, certified functional strength coach, and strengthcoach.com. There's a bunch more. So welcome to a criminally overdue appearance. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm happy that we finally pinned this date down.
Yeah, we've been at a few events together. We spoke at the 2023, if I'm not mistaken, Raise the Bar conference together. We were part of that. And I most recently saw you at Mark Fisher and Pete Dupuy's Business for Unicorns event.
Yeah, that was great. I've been the BFU events are always a great one to see people, but then continually get better.
Yeah, for the coaches, especially gym owners listening, those are fantastic. So try to put those on your radar. All right, let's have some fun. There's a little preamble here, but I pulled a quote off your social media. Quote, health and wellness spending in the U.S. equates to $2 trillion each year, more than $6,000 a person. And yet 75% of adults don't meet minimum activity guidelines. 1 in 4 Americans has a gym membership. Of those who do, half quit within 6 months. Nearly half of the people who intend to be active never follow through. For all our investment in health, the return is shockingly poor. Why isn't this working?
Yeah, it's crazy. One thing that I realized when you look at the spending numbers and you just look at the fitness landscape is largely fitness is marketed to the already fit and the wealthy. And that's a small minority of the population, right? Much of what you see, especially this time of the year, it's holiday season, a lot of marketing for wearables and fitness adjacent things like clothing, is that, there's a whole segment of the population that one might not have access. And I think a lot of our messaging is to people who are already fit. And there's a lot of people in the fitness industry, or a lot of people who want to get fit, who don't really know where to start. And what they see lots of times for portrayals of fitness online probably seems like it's light years away from where they're ready to begin. And so I think a lot of our messaging needs to be more focused on trying to reach beginners and people who are fearful of coming into the gym, as opposed to trying to message to people who are already in our orbit. I think a lot of fitness professionals message to people who are like them rather than people who are probably outside of that group who we're trying to bring in.
Is part of the issue modern society and limited attention span and how damned good media companies marketing is for things that will compete for time and dollars?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no shortage of information, right? We actually have information overload. What we don't have is a filter for the everyday person looking to improve their overall health to figure out, hey, what do I actually need to do and what am I able to completely ignore and able to get started? So I think so many people get paralyzed, I need to get all the right gym clothing. I need to read and get the perfect program. I need to make sure I get the perfect nutrition before they even start, right? And really, the ceiling is so low. It's just get in there and do something. And we can figure out along the way. A lot of guys like you or me, we didn't know what we were doing when we started, right? If you think back to the beginning. But maybe, when it's I'm thinking I've been training for 20 years now. I think I maybe have it figured out. But it takes a long time. I think a lot of people are just afraid to start and they get overwhelmed by all of the options that are out there.
I can imagine almost everybody listening to this episode is probably going to be in what you described, that already narrower band that gets it, right? Mm-hmm. So let's speak to them, because we're all surrounded by people who are struggling. They're the ones with the good intentions, but never follow through. How can you help make it more accessible, interesting, less daunting for the people in your world? And maybe I'll also give you this. In being a gym owner, having worked in gyms for a really long time, and yes, you work with a lot of what you guys do, most notably is young athletic populations, right? But you also have adults too. What's worked? What have you seen work for the people we're talking about, we're trying to help?
It's so we have people all the time, what's the old message you always get when you talk to people at a holiday party this time of the year? Oh, I want to come work out with you, but I got to get in shape first, and then I'm going to start. And that's the thing that drives every trainer crazy. And the number one thing I say is, like, right now, let's just get you in, right? Whenever I talk to coaches or I talk to people who are fit, who want to get their friends fit, I said, just get them in the door. Because if you can get them in the door and you can get them around people who are either great professionals or either just really knowledgeable enthusiasts who want their friends to exercise, and just get them in there to start, that's the hardest step. They always say, like, the heaviest weight's the front door, right? And so whenever I talk to people who, are fearful of starting, trying to make this not a scary experience, I think you got to put yourself in the shoes of a person who is maybe out of shape or has history of pain and is fearful of the exercise environment. They walk into a place like MBSC, they see jerseys on the wall, they see the music, they see a bunch of fit people working out, and the first thing they say to themselves in their mind is like, oh, this isn't for me, or I've made a mistake. And we have to do everything we can with our messaging and our portrayal of fitness to be like, no, this is for you, right? And then when you actually get into MBSC, you see, an 80-year-old couple working out together. You see an NHL athlete training right in the block right next to them. You see a 12-year-old kid exercising. You think like, oh, okay, I think I can exercise here. But often the hardest thing is just getting them in the door to begin with. I actually have a good story. We have a guy who trained with us for 15 years. He's with us forever, and he's one of our biggest fans, are like diehard clients. And he had a bunch of people that lived kind of in this condo complex with him, who he always wanted to come. And there's this couple, Stu and Nancy. At the time, they were probably 70, early 70s. And he'd always tell them, hey, you got to come to MBSC with me. You got to come. It's going to be the best thing for you. And they would go to our website and they would look at our marketing messaging, and all they would see was train where the pros train. And all they would see was the professional athletes. And all of our social media was all centered on professional athletes training and trying to show like the most extreme versions of, how great we were. And they would immediately say, that place isn't for me. And he asked them to come for years until eventually he literally said, get in the car. And he put them in the car and he drove them up to the gym and has had them start working out with us. And that was 13 years ago. And they've been coming, ever since. And so he literally had to get them over that hump, because all they saw was, oh my God, I can't fit in this place. And for them, now they're in their mid 80s and they're still training. And so I think sometimes you got to force your friends to like, hey, let's just go do this. You just need to start. And then you can start to build some momentum from there if you can build off some positive experiences that first time that they're in the gym.
How do you walk that line with your own media and messaging? Because you just described that you guys are legendary in the space of working with, NFL, NHL, like top pro level athletes, and the college pipeline to get there.
Yeah. Well, I Never Lose a Customer Again. Great book from Joey Coleman. He talks about when the customer is in the assess stage, after they found out about your business, the number one question they're asking themselves internally is, can you solve my problem? And they quickly make a snap decision, consciously or unconsciously, that, hey, this person can or cannot help me. This business can or cannot help me. And so I think we've had to be more intentional with our messaging, especially as our business has changed. It's important to realize, in 2008, when I started there, I could count on one hand the amount of general population clients that we had. Now it accounts for about 60% of our revenue this time of the year, with the exception of summers when it kind of flips towards athletes. And so we have to think like, okay, if we really care about this segment of the population, we should be messaging to them intentionally about how we can help them and why this is the right place for them, not just trying to message, hey, this is the great NHL player we had, or this is the most fit person we have. Message to everybody so that they are willing to pick up the phone and call or come and walk in the door.
This episode is brought to you by Just Bite Me Meals. I work long days and I won't compromise my client experience or sacrifice my workout, sleep, or nutrition. So I needed a quality and reliable meal prep service so I could save time on cooking and shopping and have more time for the stuff that matters. Net out the cost of groceries, and the service isn't as much as you might think. And regular impulsive food delivery apps, eating out, that costs way more anyway. I get more meal variety and less dishes to clean, and I've been referring clients to Just Bite Me Meals for a long time, and I recently started ordering myself. Food is great. The beef brisket tacos are my favorite so far, And there's a lot of menu choice. Your calories and macros are listed. The portions are great. You can order custom meals. They deliver to your door, or you can pick up from their storefront. And I'm sorry to listeners outside of Alberta, but Just Bite Me Meals is currently just in Edmonton, Calgary, Grand Prairie, and Fort McMurray. Ordering from Just Bite Me Meals made my life easier instantly. And you can get 10% off on all your orders using my code, Andrew Coates Fitness, all caps, on their website. That's Andrew Coates Fitness, all capitals, or go to the link and the code in the show notes. Do you think part of this fear of going to the gyms are narratives to keep people from confronting something uncomfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think anybody who is coming to train with you, right? Think about this. If they're paying $100 or more dollars an hour, most likely, if you're in a major market listening to this, there is something they want to change about themselves. I remember Dan John saying, like, everybody that comes in there is probably had an experience where they looked in the mirror and said, this isn't me. Whether it's an athlete who's injured, whether it's somebody who's not performing their best, whether it's somebody who's overweight or someone who has pain, they're coming and investing a large amount of money into this service because there's something about themselves that they think needs to change. And so in order to kind of make those changes in your life, you do have to confront something that it can be uncomfortable, right? Hey, I'm not living to my potential. I'm not working as hard as I should be. I'm not taking care of myself so I can support my family, whatever it is. And that can be a psychological battle, and we'll sometimes set up these kind of narratives that say, oh, I can't do this, as a convenient way to not, address those things.
And how have you helped create an environment where you've been able to break down some of those narratives and get people to stick around?
I think that first 30-day window in any training experience is critical, because they have not become like a long-term committed customer yet. They're still feeling out, okay, I committed and I signed up, I started, but do these people really care about me? And so I think the biggest mistake a lot of businesses and trainers make is that client feels neglected, like after the sale is made. You get them in the door, you say, oh, this is your first session. And then all of a sudden they still haven't figured out how things work here. I think sometimes we forget that, we're used to, hey, you come in, you pick up a foam roller, then you stretch, then you warm up, then you do power, then you do strength training. They don't really get any of this. Most likely, this is the first time the customer has ever experienced the way of doing things in the gym. And so they're filled with uncertainties. And so what I always say to our staff is like, hey, we want to give them as many positive experiences in that first 30 days. Everyone on staff comes up and introduces themselves and says, hi, nice to meet you, wants to learn a little bit about them. We make sure we spend extra time with them in that first fragile 30-day window to be like, hey, we're gonna handhold you and make sure you're on an intro program if you're in the groups, or you're getting extra check-ins from the coaches in the front office. If you're a personal training client, following up with you after the first and second and third session saying, hey, how'd you feel after? All of those little things make that person feel like they're a little bit more comfortable in their business and they're supported. And it can make getting through those kind of psychologically challenging hurdles for them, especially early on, a little bit easier as they start to kind of change their identity of who they are. Hey, I'm somebody who exercises now. But if we don't kind of guide them through that fragile period and we don't continually say, hey, can I help you with anything? Hey, how are you feeling today? Then sometimes they feel like, okay, yeah, this wasn't the right place for me.
And the coaches and operators listening will either understand that and know, all right, I should be doing more of that, or we're doing that. But that's probably a thin sliver of what most gym experiences are like. So for the person who's trying, and again, I'm guessing that most of the listeners here are already pretty active, so maybe it's the people in your world. How can someone proactively do this for themselves, advocate for themselves as they enter a gym space? And maybe not talk themselves out of leaving quickly.
I think one, start to keep a record of what you do and kind of reflect on how you feel. If you're somebody, who has pain, look for non-painful entry points. Don't try to force anything and try to think, hey, I keep a record of what I do. I think if we're intentionally writing down, hey, this is what I did for workout, this is where I'm making progress, you can start to visually track your journey, which is motivating for people. I think if you're not going in there with a plan, even if it's as simple as, hey, I'm going to work out for 30 minutes and I'm going to do like these 3 exercises, intentionally tracking your work gives you feedback where we might not necessarily notice it. Also, ask for a friend. I mean, the number one thing we can do to improve consistency is work out with other people. The community aspect makes exercise much more sticky. You get social facilitation. You're willing to show up when you're a little bit tired. You're willing to work a little bit harder when you're with somebody else. And this kind of group cohesion idea, like working out in a small group, going with your gym buddy all the time. What happens is when you're trying to change your behavior adapts to the tribe around you. And if the normal behavior of the tribe becomes your behavior when you're around them enough. And so I always tell people, like, if you're worried about, showing up consistently, our group programs are a really good option for you, because you know what happens after the first couple weeks? They're always like, hey, where was Steve? And then we all check in with Steve. Hey, where were you today? And then you feel like, oh, I got to show up next week because they're going to be looking for me. So if you have a social environment that you're going into, I think it makes adherence much easier, and it's not nearly as lonely of a journey.
So, I mean, as a business owner, obviously having group programs allows you to scale income and scale the use of your space, but is that community support actually a critical feature? Is it a bug or is it a feature? You lean heavy on it?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like early on probably wasn't what we were thinking about. It was probably more or less like, hey, we wanted to provide a price point that was more economically accessible for people. We realized also that's the best way to kind of scale our business. But then over time, you really start to realize like, oh, these people are coming for the relationships more so than they might even be coming for exercise, whether it's a relationship with the coach or the people in the group. This became their third space. And so it ends up going from maybe a bug to a feature once you realize, oh, now I want to double down on this. How are ways that I can make this community aspect more valuable by continually finding ways to get these people together, or doing things in a community aspect, putting together events where these people become closer, and then that gym becomes stickier and everybody kind of wins, both the gym owner as well as the client.
What's more intimidating to step into cold, a commercial gym space or an athletic sports training facility like yours?
I think a commercial gym space, because I think generally a lot of people going there are not, thinking about anybody else. And that although that might sound like, oh, no one's thinking about me, that you don't really have that community aspect. Like I could go walk into, a box gym down the street and no one will talk to me. I'll check in the first on the front desk. Their head will probably be down. Then I'll go and wander around, and I could go through there without any social interaction. Whereas typically kind of, I think often my experiences in gyms similar to ours, where it's very training focused, there is usually much more of a social interaction to it. If you can get over kind of the scariness of, oh, there's an athletic training facility where there's athletes working out and people who might be really fit, I do find that there's kind of more of a stickiness to the social environment there.
People coming back to gyms, especially we saw, people moving online largely because it was the most available option, especially during the COVID years. But yeah, are you noticing that people they want to be in public gym spaces? Are people still staying in their basements with their home equipment? What's going on?
I think more and more people are coming back into gyms. I mean, one really positive thing, if we're going to take any silver linings out of COVID, is like, yes, everybody went and had to force, isolate into their homes and work out at home and work from home and all these things. But I think fitness did get kind of a boom as a result. I think there are people who started prioritizing their health as a result of COVID. There are people who started realizing how important social connection was as a result of having it being taken away. And so I think if you look at, especially the economic data as it relates to gyms since then, we are seeing gyms doing better. We're seeing people trying to get into community aspects. I mean, if you look at the trends online, whether it's things like High Rocks, whether it's things like run clubs, which seems to have exploded, people are finding social environments in which they can exercise. And whichever thing gets you to start doing that, I think is a positive. And so that is pretty encouraging to see.
And within that, are you also seeing people trending into one-on-one training, group programs as well? Is it not just boots on the ground of the gym? Are they also seeking coaching support?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I am in a lot of gyms through CFSC. I'm working with a lot of gym owners and trainers in these kind of private training based facilities. And you're seeing more and more of them pop up. I mean, if I just look in our immediate environment where our gym is in kind of the North Shore, Massachusetts, I mean, there's multiple training businesses in the one town that we're in that are similar to ours. And so I think you are seeing having people seek expertise, whether it's online or if it's in person. I do think, weightlifting is much more pop culture than it
Mm.
was, 10 years ago, obviously. And you're seeing more and more influential people talk about the value of lifting weights. And so I would say, like, go back to the early 2000s and you go into a gym, you see a lot of women on cardio and you see a lot of diehard people lifting. And now, when I have like a 60 something year old woman come in and say, hey, I know I should be lifting weights, like that wasn't common 20 years ago. And so that's great. And they're seeking professional guidance to do so.
And you think that this is one of the most accessible outlets to seek real human connection? I mean, I think that you and I probably grew up in a world, as many listeners, where, I mean, bars obviously is one piece of a big
Yeah.
puzzle. We know the alcohol consumption rates are trending very, I think, rapidly downward.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it's actually amazing that you see liquor consumption's dropping. And when you realize a lot of people are still working from home and have remote based jobs. So like the thing was, hey, you would work in the office and then people would go out and drink after, right? That
Mm.
isn't really a thing anymore because that work social culture is largely gone from a lot of major cities, especially. And so I think that, again, the gym does become a third space. The run club, the whatever exercise based group becomes a social outlet for people because there is not that, going to the bar and going out with your coworkers. It's, hey, I'm going to go work out after. And so that's what fitness businesses should really try to jump on because there probably is a little bit of a vacuum there, and where we can all kind of try to seize that space. And obviously that's a huge impact on overall health for the better if that's what people are spending their time doing rather than going out and drinking beers.
You get the double magnifier of the health
Mhm.
promoting benefits, but also the social interaction,
Yeah.
which we know. I mean, I don't know the cliche, but like loneliness is as detrimental for your health as smoking. Right? And
Mhm.
I had
Well, it's so
Dr. Ben
funny.
Ryan on recently talking about that. He's a he's a PhD in that. So, but go on.
Oh, I used to think it's just funny, like when you talk about, the social aspect being a bug or a feature and us trying to recognize these things over time. When I first started in fitness, I was like any kind of hardcore trainer. Like I just cared about the training. I cared about the technique. I cared about the science and everything like that. And I didn't really think nearly as much about the community aspect. And over the time since we've owned the business, we always do these things. We have Christmas parties, we have fundraisers, we have client competitions like Halloween costumes, things like that. And all of those little things were things I didn't really pay attention to early on. And then I realized all of those little things that we do, uh, that our gym staff does a really good job putting together, continues to double down on that community aspect within our gym. That makes people feel like they're part of something or they're part of a tribe. They proudly wear their MBSC t-shirts everywhere. All of those types of things. And now I realize how important that type of stuff is in the facility to make people feel like, hey, this is my place and that this is our community. And obviously that has a huge impact on our business, but also has a huge impact on them and their psychological health and their social lives.
What about the parent that comes in, doesn't care about any of that, just says to you, hey, my kid, has a shot at the NHL, the NFL, et cetera, whether that's realistic or not. How does that fit in? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I had a great conversation with someone yesterday kind of about long-term athletic development. And we see a lot of parents come to us and they think their 12-year-old kid is the next Connor McDavid, no matter what. Hey, they're on the select team. And, you know, I think it's very hard sometimes for both parents and kids alike to be able to deal with this delayed gratification and realize that, hey, athletic development, no matter how talented your kid is a long-term play. And so the number one thing I tell the parents is like, my number one goal is to, one, keep your kid healthy and to provide a positive role model and positive development path for them to follow. And this isn't going to be something we do in 3 months. My goal is if your kid comes to me as a 12-year-old, that they're here as an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old when they're in college. And so getting them to understand that, we're not going to lean into the early specialization model. We're not going to crush your kid when they come in. Like, I've had dads after the first session, this guy brought his two kids in, and he was like, "Hey, why are my kids able to walk out of here? Like, why didn't they throw out today?" And I'm like, easy. Like, that's not what we do. And so I always say, like, they'll be like, "Hey, can they come 5 days a week? Just give me 2 days a week, but do it for 50 weeks a year. Can you do that for me?" And continuing to double down on that message. And I think that even the most hardcore hovering parent can be dissuaded if you start to build trust with them and with the kid, and that you have their best interest in mind. And my experience dealing sometimes with difficult parents is continuing to message that, like, "Hey, I have your kid's best interest in mind, and the kid likes working out here." Over time, they start to defer decision making to you. But it can be a challenge when all of the messaging from the privatized sports culture and the sports clubs is, "Hey, this kid just needs more training, more practice, more tournaments." That you got to get them to take a step back and see things kind of from a 30,000-foot view.
You remind me, I had a hockey parent bring me his 3 sons and their friend and wanted me to train all 4 of them, right? Great kids. Lots of potential. And the oldest was already a WHL hockey player. I remember him, and he was talking to me, and we initially had great rapport. That broke down for some other reasons later on his side. But he wanted to get their body fat percentage tested. Now, I dissuaded this for a handful of reasons, because one, I knew one of the boys was a little bit more vulnerable. He was probably the one with maybe the lowest ceiling, but he was also the one who had a bit more body fat. And after getting into the psychology of this guy, I think it was rooted in trying to shame that son. But ultimately, in this particular case, I definitely wasn't worried that their body fat percentage was going to have anything to do with their performance. But in this particular case, I actually went a different route, and I basically just explained to him how inaccurate these things can be, and for the cost of them, there wouldn't be much value and payoff for him. So thankfully he didn't, but I remember those types of conversations.
Yeah, they're always challenging, and I always try to tell them, like, "Listen, I've had, we had Jack Eichel as, a 13-year-old. I had Chris Kreider as a 13-year-old, and they trained just like your kid is going to train, but they were coming 2 or 3 days a week, and they were just consistent. We didn't crush them coming 5 days a week. I didn't take any of their body fat. It's a real simple approach, and sometimes they don't want to hear that. They want to think there's a silver bullet that they can give to their kid to get them to the next level. And I always say, like, training is a multiplier. And so, if you take a kid who's 10 talented and they have 10 commitment, there are 100. That's your Jack Eichels, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a kid who's, a 5 talented and they're 10 committed, that's a 50. That's a kid who maybe gets a scholarship and can play Division II sports, right? And so it just comes down to, what are you willing, or can you commit to what we're going to give you 2 days a week? And they're going to reach their ceiling, whatever it might be. And having honest conversations with them about, hey, we're going to put your kid in the best position to succeed based on their skill level and their training. And most of all, I'm going to make sure that they enjoy the experience, and that they're having a positive experience in developing skills outside of sports, because the majority of these kids are not going to be professional athletes. Do they have character? Do they show up on time? Do they treat people with respect? Do they put their weights away? All of those things are equally or more important than, any of the physical attributes they might develop.
Well, you mentioned the early specialization model, so we won't go there, because I actually had Mike Boyle on quite recently, and we actually do big deep dive there. So anybody listening wants to actually hear the episode with Mike Boyle, scroll back through or just message me. I'll send it to you. But you did allude to something else. How much of an impact does strength and conditioning have on the success, the high-end career success of these young athletes?
I think it can have a really large effect. I think we take them up a level or two, right? And so, most importantly, we probably keep them healthier. You're not going to take, like me, like I was never going to be, didn't matter how hard I trained in high school, I was never going to be, a professional American football player, right? But you know what? It probably, because I was dedicated, I was a captain, I was an all-star, I was an all-state athlete, probably because of that. And I was much healthier because of that. Those are the things that you want to look at. If I didn't have a commitment to strength training, I probably wouldn't have any of those things. And most importantly, I would say I have a lot of kids who train with me in high school. And what is probably an even bigger impact that is positive to me is a lot of these kids come back as adults when they have normal jobs and they're in a consistent training program, or if they don't live near here, they're training themselves because they learn those skills. And so I always say to parents, like, yeah, we're going to improve their athletic performance. There's no question in that. I know that if they come, 2, 3, 4 days a week, they're going to be a better athlete and they're going to be healthier. That to me is very simple. But I think they develop habits that they carry with them. And they're going to be healthier overall because they started making an investment in fitness at a young age.
This makes me think about the other end of the spectrum is the athletes as they're getting older. And there's probably a bit of risk of cherry picking in this, where I'll get into. And two, there's definitely some of these cohorts where performance enhancing drugs probably played a role. So obviously in the baseball world where we're seeing guys, they're mid to late 30s or even early 40s, guys who've either been directly linked to or, there's evidence of use or at least strong rumor. Let's say a Roger Clemens, a guy is throwing gas in his late early 40s, right?
Yeah.
But then I think about the NHL, which there was never the steroid buzz around the NHL, but I look at some of these guys and go, oh, they were pretty muscular and pretty good, pretty late.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder. But even since then, let's say, a guy like Zdeno Chara, who's playing to 45, a Chris Chelios is playing to 45, and Nick Lidstrom, who is one of the best defensemen in the NHL, I think the last year before he retired, either his late 30s or maybe he was right on the cusp of 40. And then I think about, again, cherry picking a Danny Heatley, who's washed out of the NHL at 30 to 31 years of age, who has a reputation as being a shithead and a party boy who got his best friend killed in a drunk driving accident in their early 20s. Do you think that the dedication to strength and conditioning has its greatest power at sustaining levels of performance and career longevity, which can mean one more contract and millions?
Yeah. I mean, I 100%, I believe that. I remember early on in my career, so Gosder Cherilus played in the NFL for a long time. He was an offensive lineman, trained with us. And I remember early on in my career asking Mike, like at the start of the offseason, saying like, hey, what do you want to focus on with Gauze like this summer? What are you trying to develop? And he just looked at me and said, just keep him healthy and get him to the next contract. Like, that's what we're doing. We're essentially maintaining these athletes' qualities as nature is trying to take them away from them. And the constant injury and stress of training is starting to take it away from them. And I actually remember hearing an interview with Tom Brady following the Super Bowl comeback against the Falcons. He did an interview with Peter King that was really, really good. And he kind of talks throughout it about like play by play in the game. But the more fascinating part was him talking about his physical body. And he said, I'm at the point in my career where mentally I already have all the answers to the test. He goes, there's no time that I get out there behind the line and look at a defense and start to make calls that I don't know what I can do and make a play. The game is slow for me mentally. But he said, what I realized when I started to really double down on my health was by the time I got the answers to the test, a lot of people's bodies fall apart, right? By the time you mentally, a lot of people, especially as a quarterback, such a cerebral game, start to figure out, hey, this is how I play the position, your body starts to fail. And he said, I need to really commit myself to physically maintaining my body so I can continue to compete at the highest level. And so I think you think about a lot of these guys and girls with their professional careers who are, you say in their 30s, in their mid 30s, starting to get later into their career, really dedicating yourself towards, hey, what do I need to do to make sure my body can perform the way I need to? And it's that extender. And so we have a lot of these, NHL players, PWHL players who, are in that stage of their career who are diehards in being in there because they say, like, this is what makes me feel good. And this is how I can continue to get to that next contract, which can be life-changing at that level for some of these players.
And it could even be legacy defining in some cases.
Yeah.
I think of Sidney Crosby, and I'm of the understanding that Sidney takes his fitness and everything, off-season conditioning, very seriously. And he is playing, if I'm not mistaken, the best hockey in the history of the NHL at his age. Alex Ovechkin's kind of funny because, like, you might look at him and there's some sort of indications that, well, he's not like the latest guy ever. Last year he had legendary season. He was
Yeah.
off to a slow start this year as of time of recording, but then all of a sudden he's caught fire, so he's blowing shit up again. And there's no way. I mean, we also know that these guys are phenoms. The talent runs through them, but at the same time, I can't help believe that modern strength and conditioning is a powerful factor. We know that Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid take this stuff profoundly seriously, and they're still young guys, but my guess is they will probably age better, barring some sort of unlucky and catastrophic injury. You mentioned Jack Eichel earlier. I wonder to what degree is his dedication to strength and conditioning part of him being able to recover from an experimental surgery. Like he had a disc replacement surgery in his neck, and there was a conflict with the Buffalo Sabres that they didn't want to approve this thing. They want a spinal fusion, which would have had negative impacts. And so he was traded, and now he's, again, one of the best players in the NHL.
Yeah. I mean, you think about these players are advocating, they're now advocating for themselves more than they ever have. And they're dedicated to whatever physical things they need to do to extend their careers more than they ever have been. And you're seeing people play great for longer. I mean, look at LeBron James. People criticize what they see about him for training all the time, but he's still playing at his age at a high level. And so I think that, when I think about us working with our professional athletes, so much of our time is with how do I design this program to continue to deal with the injuries you sustained over the course of the season? How do I continue to make you feel good? Whether that's you getting manual therapy, seeing the physical therapist, seeing the trainers, getting individual work in. All summer is about kind of putting those pieces together so that when they get to preseason in September, they're feeling good and they're at their best. And so we're constantly kind of tinkering with, what are the little things we need to do to make sure you can recover and continue to sustain this level of performance for another year. And then we come back again and do it again.
You mentioned LeBron, and yeah, I'm pretty sure. I know there are other high-level athletes. Every once in a while, you get a video of them doing something, and then some of the strength coaches or enthusiasts come out and they criticize the living shit out of the form or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two parts to this. One, how much does the exercise selection and even the execution even matter at a granular level? And then, well, let's do that one first. Actually,
I think a lot less than many fitness professionals are willing to admit. I think that we want to have this idea that everything is very precious and my program is very precious. But I think that if the athletes are doing things that get them some load and help them maintain, I think a lot of times we forget that maintaining strength and power at that level is a lot easier to do than it is to build it from scratch at the beginning. And so a lot of these athletes, if they're getting some consistent training in every week, they're doing things that mentally make them feel good, they're getting their joints moving, that probably goes a really long way to help someone with unbelievable athletic talent, like LeBron James, continue to do what he needs to do. And he's still going to be great. And so it's very easy on the outside for people to look at something and say, oh, that's garbage. But at the end of the day, they're performing and they feel good. And that's the end goal, period. End and stop.
Then it makes me think of Michael Jordan and was it Tim Grover? And Tim certainly built quite the career off the back of having worked with very self-promoting, self-aggrandizing. And him and working with Kobe Bryant. But if you actually go back and look at the video of some of the stuff he was doing with Michael, I mean, it was borderline circus stuff. So
yeah,
you're kind of wondering, like, how much of an impact was this? So here's the second part of the question is how much of this, and I've heard Ben Bruno, who's one of your alumni, echo this. One of the biggest things is just not breaking your athletes.
Yes. Yeah. And like, that should be the number one goal. Like when you have someone, say it's Michael Jordan who comes in to see you, you have to think every decision you make is, okay, how could this possibly go wrong? And this is something that Mike drills into us all the time is that, listen, think of all the ways, whatever this exercise selection could go wrong and think, is there a way that I can get what I want to get as a result without having to put them at risk? And there's no athlete that comes in that says, no, I really need to do this exercise. I really need to do this lift. They don't care about exercise selection like we do. And so we want to think like there's no thing I have to force you into. And my number one goal is to keep these people healthy and feeling good And if you can do that for the client, for the athlete, that's all that they care about.
Now, extrapolate that out back to the enthusiast who's worried that they need to do these arbitrary exercises. Same
Yeah,
rules, right?
it's the 100% the same rules. So when you go into the gym, like you're going to read or see on social media, hey, you need to do this exercise. This is the exercise you have to do. And in reality, none of that's true. Find ways to get load into your legs, find ways to get load into your upper body, find ways to get some load into your trunk in multiple patterns and planes. And however you go about doing that at the very, like you said, at the very baseline level is what we need to start with. Whatever you can do from an entry point that's pain free, that's all that matters. And so don't get caught up thinking, hey, I have to squat, or I have to do this plyometric exercise, or I have to do this conditioning. You don't have to do any of that. You can find a way to get the adaptation. There's so many modes and options for us now within gyms to get fit that you have to find the pain-free entry point for you.
Mm. And injury prevention's a bit of a contentious point, I think, across the strength conditioning and physical therapy realm. And I mean, I'm comfortable with the idea that we cannot 100% guarantee injury prevention in what we do, right? There's freak accidents. But are there principles that you believe that can lower the risk, mitigate as much as possible?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question we can reduce injuries, especially non-contact related ones. You look at the data, athletes who strength train and do plyometric and have exposure to sprinting have a huge reduction in non-contact injuries, specifically things like hamstring strains, hip flexor strains, Achilles ruptures, any sort of muscular strain in general, because they're consistently in a basic program. So if we can get progressive overload, real basic progressive overload from a strength training standpoint, if we can expose them to high velocities in sprinting, you're going to see a reduction in things like hamstring strains. We can get people moving in multiple planes and ensure they have just adequate levels of joint range of motion. You're going to see a large reduction in incidental injuries. And again, you just have to hope for the best, because freak things do happen. But I mean, I can tell you for sure, the payoff is there.
And I guess it goes back to our conversation about the athletes who are aging into their early, mid, certainly late 30s. We already know that certain qualities like speed, power are in decline. There's theoretically already loss of muscle and bone. Now, again, resistance training does a wonderful job of attenuating that, certainly through your 30s, but even later on. Do you think that's actually a big reason why the athletes, it's a big differentiator for the athletes who are committed to strength training versus the people who maybe just continue with, I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy, but the wilder lifestyle, more alcohol, which we know is very detrimental to recovery, not eating great, especially for the athletes who have very high calorie demands, and then that demand maybe even goes away as a career winds down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, even if we're training our power and training our capacity into our, like my age, I'm 38. Even if I'm actively training power, I'm still probably losing it to some degree, right? You're fighting that downward slide, just like a general population client is. But the difference maker is the people who are fit early on in life and then continue to fight to stay fit early on, and as they get into midlife, that downward slide is a lot slower. And that's true for athletes, just like his general population clients. They're probably just up on a little bit of a higher tier than everybody else, but they're still declining. And so you have to continue to fight against that, whether you're a professional athlete or an everyday person, to, stay above kind of that injury threshold barrier as you start to age.
And that injury threshold barrier, I think we can think about that in a different way as well, especially as we get much older, is the threshold where we're independent or not. And we definitely see, I mean, I've seen graphics on this stuff, that people who maintain muscle strength, bone health, mobility, they tend to stay above that threshold of independence far longer to very late points in life. Whereas a lot of people who don't do any of these things, they may have, especially through modern pharmacology, medicine, the longevity side of it. But once the independence drops past a certain point, then, well, shit, maybe you can't walk around on your own. Maybe you require care. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff here, right? You're in a assisted living facility in a lot of cases. And yes, there's lots of the pedantic types. Some of the stuff totally beyond people's control. There's illness and disease that simply has no relationship to any of this, but we know that a tremendous amount of this is within our power.
Yeah. So there's a disability threshold for things like VO2 max and strength and power that when you can't, walk up and down the stairs on your own, you need to get a house where you're living on one floor. When you can't, get up out of a chair easily, you start to need assistance, paid professional assistance in your home. When you can't turn to reach behind you and you can't, wipe your ass after you get up off the toilet, that's when you need really to be in assistance living. That's like the truth, like thoracic mobility. There's all of these things that people don't think about often until it's too late. And when you think about people's biggest fear as they get older, it's that loss of independence probably more than anything else, is that I need to depend on someone else in order to go through my daily life. And so I always tell people, like, we're all aging. We're just on different parts of the spectrum. We think about all these things as old person problems, but the deposits you start to make when you're in your 30s, when you're in your 40s, when you're in your 50s are going to help carry you all the way through. It's very hard to play catch up when you're already 70. You can do it. You can get stronger late in life. You can get more power late in life. It's just much, much harder than carrying it with you. Like what I alluded to before, maintenance is a lot easier. And so I always tell people who are in their 30s, like, you need to start thinking about 30 years down the line, because all of a sudden, the stuff that is really easy for you to do now, you might take for granted all of a sudden when you get older.
A quick break from this episode to shout out RP Strength and the RP Hypertrophy app. I have a big confession. I've never used a coach before. I've always auto-regulated my training for decades. But I've known Dr. Mike Isertel and Nick Shaw, the founders of RP, for years, and I'll get behind anything they create, including years of reading their books, consuming their media, attending their seminars, and having them as guests on the show. And I've been using the RP Hypertrophy app now for several months. And several things have happened. It forced me to make smaller and more gradual but better increases in weight volume across time, like putting 5-pound plates on each side of a leg press. Like, who does that? Never before. Only 45s. It cut out the junk volume. It made my workouts faster and more efficient. I show up with a plan. I didn't have to think about what to do. I feel more accountable having a log my progress. And I don't skip things because I don't feel like it. If hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to manage your gains and to take the guesswork out of your program. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free, and if you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got you a $50 US dollar discount, so go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. That's rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP. Every once in a while I'll post something that's somehow adjacent to this, and there'll be a comment about someone who works in an assisted living facility for older adults or what have you, and boy, they're the ones who get to see this, because this stuff is otherwise kind of hidden from public view. And it's like, these are the people. It's like, I am not fucking around. I do not want to be here. So all the stuff you just said, it's a quote I literally pulled out of here. It says, aging isn't just an old person's problem. We're all aging, just at different stops along the timeline. So I think you certainly got partially into that, but do you want to go deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. And when I, had kids, right? So I have a daughter that's 3, I have a son that's 1. I think a lot of people always talk about how, fitness is hard when you're a parent, and it is. Your time is compressed. You have less time to exercise. But one thing I really started to think about was like, okay, my kids are going to be around long after I'm gone. And, I want to be able, when now I'm 38, when I'm 78 and my kids are, 43 and 41, like, I'd like to still be able to be around their kids and be around grandkids and be able to be active and not be necessarily a burden to them because my physicality has fallen off. And so it was actually a big motivator to me to think like, okay, let's think a longer time horizon. Why am I doing the things that I want to do? Why am I doing this from an exercise standpoint? And I think you need to continue to think, how can I continue to support my health along the timeline? And I look at some of my clients. I talked about Stu and Nancy, who are 83 and 84, who come in 2 days a week and have been consistent in their exercise program and their entire life. They don't act like 83 and 84-year-old people, because their entire life they've been active. not just physically, but also mentally, like learning other languages, traveling, taking on new hobbies late into life. And I think about my other client, Jim. I posted a video of him yesterday doing feet elevated ring rows at 80, right? And he's a big guy. He's like 200, probably 210 pounds, and doing sets of 10 with his feet up. I mean, this is a guy that consistently exercises and consistently sees me 3 days a week and goes out and goes for walks and runs and things like that. But that's an investment he's made over his entire life, not something he started late. And so you have to think like the earlier you start, the better the payoffs are. It's just like investing in the stock market. You know, that compound interest pays off at the very end of the line, especially.
Side quest, you still train your own clients in person, even with everything else you do.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it's the only way you can really stay connected to what's happening and what's great in training. I think the further you get away from seeing people in the gym and interacting with clients on the floor and building programs and problem solving for them, the more you start talking about training in theory and the less you start thinking about the practicality of the things you're actually talking about. And that's why I think Mike still has a pulse on what's going on, because he's still in there coaching. Like I saw him in there this week with a client, and then the groups of athletes are in there training, he's in there coaching them. That's how you still keep your finger on the pulse and stay with kind of what's going on, as opposed to just kind of talking about it online.
Oh, there's a whole other thing I don't want to get into. It's more career related, but I really think that the idea of online coaching, I was on, if anybody's really interested in this, I got into this on Tim Riley's Coach 'em Up podcast. I flew down to Austin for it. And it's a very career coach related thing. I think anybody would enjoy it. But I really do think that a lot of the online coaching mentorship in our space, there are great people who did it ethically, but then I think a lot of people jumped in. And I think this worship at the altar of scale and let's high ticket mentorship, high ticket sales, whatever. I mean, I think it's a house of cards, and it's to what we talked about earlier, where people are coming back to the in-person experience. I think there's a lot of strictly online coaches who haven't otherwise built a lot of capital and legacy as authorities and educators. And as social media gets harder and harder to get attention in a crowded space, I think that's a very tough place to be in as a career right now. But that's I'm actually would love to hear your quick thoughts on that, and then we'll go back to the previous conversation.
Yeah. I mean, the online fitness space has become more and more crowded, and followers and follower count and things like that are becoming more and more kind of just like leveled off. Like there's a lot of people with a lot of followers, there's a lot of people with a lot of impact. How do you differentiate yourself? And I look at a guy who I think has done a really good job, like Luca Hocevar, who has a facility, has been training people for a long time, is still in there every day, and has also really done a great job building an online business and having a reach outside of just his brick and mortar. That is, I think, when you think about career path and how you should try to attack the balance of doing things online and doing things in person, it is a really good kind of example to follow. Ben Bruno, another example, still coaches people every time. He's been coaching forever, has a really successful online model. And what you notice when you see the messaging from people like that is that it's very grounded in practicality. And you can tell it's palpably feels real. And so I always say, like, if you're just kind of one of online person chasing online coaching, you don't really differentiate yourself in any way, at least from someone who kind of has an understanding of what to look for.
I just saw Ben post something today about him coaching Jessica Biel and what he does with her. And so he's still in person. And I was thinking Ben as well, as he's someone who got into the online coaching space very late based on push for it. And I've been reading Ben's stuff on T Nation. He's one of the people that would have inspired me to start writing and ultimately get published in there. And I mean, his stuff is where I was learning some of the better stuff on single leg training, and certainly TRX and landmine stuff. He was probably my first exposure to some of even the stuff we consider fairly basic right now. So great guy to follow.
I mean, I remember just a little kind of from my perspective, when you talk about the T Nation days and Ben writing, he was doing that in between coaching high school and middle school kids at the group at the gym. He'd be, he'd get his workout in, he'd get some Chipotle, write some articles for T Nation, then he'd go coach a group of middle schoolers and then go back and keep writing. But that's how you build a career. And that's how you build those perspectives where, like, you look at that article and think like, hey, that's really helpful to me. And so I always talk to our young coaches about like, hey, a lot of the gems that you can write about and like have an impact online are the experiences you just had with your group or your clients just before this, the questions they asked you, the problems you solved, the exercise you selected. And that is generally, I think, what resonates with people most when they read your work or see your work online.
I'll give you guys a great example. I can't count. I mean, in 15 years of very full-time in-person training, over 25,000 on the floor coaching hours. I've had a lot of it. You've had this too, where client walks in or you get that text and you find out that, oh, they're on vacation. One of my favorites is one of my guys. He's excited to go on a trip to Mexico. First day there, and I know there's alcohol involved. He's running on a pool deck in flip-flops, slips, goes down a flight of concrete steps, shatters an ankle, spends the week, his vacation week in a Mexican hospital, has surgery, comes back, needs a second surgery on that leg. So, it took a little bit to get him back in the gym, but once I got it back in there, well, shit, I've got to do everything else I can. So that leg, we can't really load it much at this point. So it's single leg extensions, just single leg press. It's all the other upper body stuff I can do with him. Now, there's a practical implications of, okay, I'm not getting him to carry a couple of heavy dumbbells over for dumbbell bench pressing, but we're barbell pressing. So, but I've seen so much of this, clients who will message me or old clients even like, hey, I tore my bicep. Okay, I'll be like, here, go do this, train the other side. And I get into the research on cross education, training with an injured limb. That stuff's really, really potent stuff. And so I built a resource for it because I was doing it in practice. And then I gave it to, I just had, as everybody listening to this, Chris Duffin was recently on the podcast. So back when he was still the steward owner of Kabuki Strength, wrote a piece for him. I get published in Kabuki Strength, pretty prestigious thing. And then that turned into a seminar and a presentation that I've done for a bunch of different events. And then it turned into an expanded thing. I wrote another article for Elite FTS on injury prevention types of stuff. And this is all this like media. And I got published on 2 massively credible platforms simply because of something that I was doing in practice, got into the research, and then said, I need to document this because I was looking around and the research is out there, but I couldn't find the resource for coaches. So I built it, the definitive. It is very detailed. If anybody wants it, message me. It's actually on my website now, and I will absolutely happily send it to you. Okay, I want to switch back. I thought about this in terms of aging milestones, but milestones in verse, the things that we stopped doing. I saw this semi-recent, a few months ago, people started talking about how there's like this point in a certain percentage of people who never sprint again. You pause to think about that. So are there any other big or of these like reverse aging milestones, these bad things that you can think of that we look back and go, wow, I haven't done that in a really long time?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing when I start to get adults in, they haven't skipped, they haven't shuffled, they haven't walked backwards, they haven't rotated. I always say like, just like general movement, there's a lot of lasts in people's lives that they don't realize. You talk about not sprinting. Like I bring them into the adult group and they say, I don't remember the last time I skipped. I don't remember the last time I do back pedals with them because they never move backwards. They never rotate. They live in this very linear sagittal plane world where they never move outside of their little box. And then you realize in redeveloping those skills with clients, you give them a broader movement palette to start to live their world in. And that might show up with them trying to, they step off a curb and they're able to balance and control themselves. Or they're able to go play with their grandkid outside and not trip and fall and land on their hip. Like all of these little things, they haven't jumped. Like I had a guy come earlier this year and I said, okay, we're going to start just a little box jump, this box like this. It's like a 3-inch box. And I said, we're going to do a box jump. And he was like, couldn't get himself to jump, right? And you realize like when you were a kid, you didn't think twice about that. My 3-year-old daughter runs, jumps right on that box. But this guy in his 60s was like, oh, I haven't really thought about jumping. And so all of these things slowly get taken away from us. And we don't realize it until often it's too late. A push-up, just being able to get yourself up off the ground. You think about it as a survival skill is very foundational. But again, when was the last time you did one? And so I think when you build programs for general population, you want to think about, okay, did we move in every direction dynamically? Did we hop, skip, jump, bound, or throw? All these basic foundational movement qualities. Did we get a strength pattern that was a knee dominant, hip dominant, a push, a pull, and a core. If we can check all those up off, and then we say, hey, I got my heart rate up a little bit, then we're building a pretty robust human, no matter what the intensity or volume is for them at that point. That's where we want to start to build off.
Even at 47, I recently had something that gave me pause. And I think this is a really good illustration of the people who may not be able to zoom out and think about a 60 or 70-year-old not being able to do a small jump. I was at the Olympia and I'm going around to the different setups, and there's some guy and they had what turned out was a 9.5-foot basketball net and had one of these smaller, squishier basketballs, not the full size. And, sort of seeing if people can actually dunk this thing. And I'm thinking to myself, so I played high school ball, right? And at 6'2", my very, very best days, I could dunk a 10-foot rim. That's not something I thought about in a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm thinking to myself, I've got a buddy who videoed himself running into dunk basketball. He actually, Mike, this is years ago, coincidence, he was actually there at the Olympia with me competing in strength sports. And he happened to video himself as he jumped, his quad tendon ripped off. Right? Full rupture. So again, then you go into the cross education type stuff we alluded to earlier, and he actually came back from that, but that was an arduous process. So that's in the back of my mind going, okay, part of me wants to see if I could do this, but I haven't thought about trying to do something like this in a really long time. I haven't done any just pure vertical max jumping in a while in my program. Leg training, tons of it, but not this. So I'm like, risk versus reward. The risk is actually catastrophically bad, but I'm like, okay, I really want to. So I do a couple little warm-up hops, move around a little bit. I jump to the thing to see if I could actually get that kind of vertical. No problem. I actually got there, grabbed the ball, and actually was able to dunk this thing. And that felt good. But I'm also thinking to myself, that might have also been really stupid. But all that's going on in my mind, and I'm 47, and it's that cusp where I grew up very athletic, and I'm thinking, wait a second, I have to hesitate whether or not I can. Do I have the ability to do this? Or should I, given the fact that I'm worried maybe I will get hurt, rupture an Achilles or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was in Italy last week, and this gym has a basketball court in it, right? And these guys are always shooting and playing basketball. And I was thinking they were all running around. These guys are all probably all in their early 20s. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do a little warm up first, right? Because again, as you get into your 30s and 40s, despite people saying oh, you can maintain your function, things start to get a little stiffer. Your tendons are a little stiffer. Things start to ache a little bit. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to warm up a little bit. Then I went and played, right? But you start to think, even for someone who's really active, you're like, okay, I want to be thoughtful about how I go through this. And then you think about the person who, is older, who, that's why they might be completely fearful to do anything, or they don't have the knowledge that maybe I should prep or warm up and then something goes wrong. So you always kind of have that thought in the back of your head as you get older.
I think this episode really came full circle. Turned out great. Everybody can follow you at Kev_in_Carr, Carr. Anything else you want to direct people to? Obviously, I held up your book, Functional Training Anatomy. This thing, easy. This actually is a great resource for someone who's trying to get into the gym. So actually might make a really good Christmas gift for a friend. But what else do you want to send people to?
Yeah, that was really why we did it, it's a kind of well-rounded training resource. Well, we do all of our education through Certified Functional Strength Coach, and that's at Certified FSC on Instagram. And then speaking of books, I have another book on the way, coming in the first half of 2026 through Human Kinetics, titled Movement is Medicine, a guide to prescribing exercise for health span and lifespan. And so what this book is meant to be is really a manual for people to understand why, and even more importantly, how to build a training program to maximize your resiliency all the way into later stages of life. What I wanted to solve with this book was, I think a lot of times when you read about health, longevity, as it relates to exercise, there's a lot of great resources that talk about the science of why these things are important. And they might be interesting to people like you or I who really want to geek out on the science end of things. But lots of times people get through these resources and still are left asking themselves, well, what do I actually do? And how do we actually practically get into strength training or get into exercise? And so what I really tried to double down over the last year was to really flesh out a really thorough resource as to, why you need to do all of these things that we discuss, how to build a well-rounded program, what exercises to do, how to program them, everything from mobility to general movement skills to power to strength training to cardiovascular exercise in one book. And so that will be coming out in the first half of 2026 through Human Kinetics. So definitely be on the lookout for that.
Fantastic. I'll probably bring you back right around that time to promote it. I think that'd be great.
That'd be
And
great.
then there's one more thing. We were talking off air. So by the time this episode is aired, it will be
Mhm.
publicly announced that you guys are again doing your MBSC spring seminar.
Yep. And so every year we do our spring seminar. It's going to be April 11th and 12th, 2026. And so, we always have guest speakers. Andy Fatachan is kind of one of our main guest speakers, along with John Paloff of, the Paloff Press. Holly Fitzgerald, who's another great physical therapist, who's going to be there talking about complete knee rehabilitation. Mike Boyle, myself, Dan McGinley, Jess Tolman, Ben Connolly, and I think we're going to have a few other guests that are going to be added on as we go. That's going to go on sale this coming week. So keep an eye out for that. That'll be online as well.
And I will be booking my flights to make sure that I'm there as well, because I haven't gone to one of these yet. Edmonton to Boston is not the straightest, easiest route, but this is important. So I'm excited. So if you guys are interested in checking this out, there are not as many events this year. So this one is a big one on my radar. If you're interested in some of the other ones that I know going on, please message me. I know that Luca Hosvar, you mentioned, is planning his Vigor Summit in September at some point. He hasn't nailed down dates yet. So put that on your radar as well. Kevin, thank you. I appreciate this. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Rami. It was really a pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation.